Hello, everyone. Thank you for accepting the invitation to the third CBC talk, which is entitled Shaping the Memory, Russian Museums as Political Instruments. My name is Mikaelyan, as Len already told you. I'm a PhD. Actually, I'm an architectural historian and museologist. And I was working in the field of difficult and contentious heritage during the past years. So today I will present you something which is related, some of my research which is related to my monograph published by the Polytechnic University of Milan, the Museum as a Political Instrument. You can find it on the website of the editor, or also free, because I've actually made it a free access from the web. So please be my guest, download it and read it if you are interested. Today we will talk about the national political discourse shaped by the regime of a single post-Soviet country, and how this political discourse is able to impact on the evolution of the museum design practice. We will talk especially about the architectural, interior, and exhibition design of some critically selected museums of Russian Federation. I've picked up Russian Federation because I'm originally from Russia. Now I live in Italy, I work in Italy, but I'm from Russia. So this is my native country, my let's say my collective memory, and also family memory, because I have a lot of members of my family which actually were arrested during the Soviet times, which were killed by the Soviet state during the political repressions under Stalin. So this is also part of my personal and family history, let's say. When we are talking about such a huge domain as this one, as shaping the memory in a country like Russian Federation, it's really very, very difficult, you know, to talk about all the museums connected to the political history and to contentious heritage. So of course you have to make your choices. You have to work on your methodology of research. In my case, I decided to focus on the museums established ex novo, so newly established after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, and not on the museums which have been already created during the Soviet times and, you know, just modified in some way after 1991. So I will present you those case studies which are newly established during the 19th and during the 2000s. And of course, we will talk basically about the Soviet political repression. You see here the photo of the Solzhenitsyn book. You see here the photo of the Stalin letter, which actually he signs the killing of thousands of people, of innocent people in the 30s. So we will talk about this part of the Soviet history, and we will also talk about the difficult and traumatic histories of the post-Soviet period, for example, about the First Chechen War during the Yeltsin era. And I wanted to make you see this image just for a few seconds, which is a conceptual interpretation of my research methodology. I think that if you are doing the research today, it could be actually useful for you, maybe, for your future research, because it shows you how I was doing the selection of case studies. You know, because when you have a lot of museums, even if they are constructed up to 1991, you know, there are a lot of them on such huge territory as Russian Federation, the largest country in the world. So you are dealing with a lot of museums. You can't actually analyze all of them evenly. So you have to choose, you have to make the multi-pronged museum mapping, and you have to apply not only some objective filters, but you have also applied some critical and practical filters. In my case, the most important filters of this mapping was the critical filter of museums featuring valuable architectural and museographical projects. So we are not talking about, you know, small museums with the self-made museum design. No, we are talking here about serious museums, which can be private or federal, but these are museums which are important on national scale. And another practical filter is the visited museums, because I've selected my case studies for the research, which I could actually visit. Because, you know, when it comes to the difficult memories and contentious heritage, you have to visit these museums. You have to, you know, feel it with your body, see it with your eyes. You have to make your assessments being there and feeling it. So it's really very, very difficult to analyze these case studies only based on photos and some data, you know, picked up from internet. Then, of course, you have to do some meetings with stakeholders, with people who work or in these museums or who create these museums, people who are responsible for the narrative. You have to do some archival research. So all these things make part of your on-site research, make part of your methodology. In my point of view, it's very, very important when it's coming to this kind of study. Now, let's talk about multidimensional memory, especially memory related to the Soviet regime. I won't talk much about that, because I'm sure that all of you know a lot about Soviet history as soon as you're interested in this research project. But I will only say that in this case, we are talking about histories, about memories, which were strictly related to 20 or maybe even 30 million people. This is the assessment based on such sources like Robert Conquest, one of the most famous historians who worked just on the numbers of Soviet political repression, and also on the findings of Alexander Vishnevsky, one of the most famous Russian demographers, one of the most acclaimed demographers in the Russian demographers in the world, who also confirmed these numbers. So we are talking about at least 20 million people who passed through the GULAG system, from the system of Soviet political repression. And we are talking not only about criminals, they were criminals, of course, but we are talking about political prisoners, up to 30%. We are talking about displaced people from Poland, from Baltic countries, from Northern Caucasus. And what's the most emotional for me, we are talking about children. Here you can see actually the photos of children which passed through the GULAG system, which were children of the traitors to the motherland. So we are talking about a very, very serious, let's say, scale of traumatic and difficult memories, which continue to live in the lives of today's Russian families, and not only Russian families, but also the families of the whole post-Soviet space. Here, to understand better the scale, I will show you the map of the GULAG camps in 1950s. So you see all these points. These are all the camps which actually covered the country. They were everywhere. And from all this huge quantity of camps, what we have today in Russia is this. It's Perm 36, the only GULAG camp which actually survived the closure and the shutdown and the recent 20 years after 30 years after the dissolution of Soviet Union. So we will be dealing with this tangible heritage and also in some way with an intangible heritage, with collective memory. So when it comes to this kind of memory studies, we have to operate with different terms, with different words, with different concepts. These concepts basically were developed starting from the mid-80s. One of the first researchers and writers who was interested in this concept was Pierre Nora. And his famous lieu de mémoire. Then these concepts were developed by a lot of researchers from all over the world. In Germany, basically, you surely know about the historians' debate and everything which was developed in the 80s in Germany, also based on the memories of the Third Reich. But we are talking here also about some new terms. For example, traumascapes, terrorscapes, which is a term developed by one of my peers, by one of my professors, who is Rob van der Larsen from Amsterdam. We are talking here about the memory lands of Sharon MacDonald, of contaminated landscapes, of phantom sites of Aleida Assmann, and so on and so on. But I would like to cite one word which I found very, very important for this research, for this presentation. It is the notion of difficult heritage presented by Sharon MacDonald. So she defines the difficult heritage as the heritage which is perceived as both material and discursive entity. So here is a very important word for the further discourse. It's the discursivity of this difficult heritage, and you will see how this discursivity can be also used in the process of instrumentalization by the state. So let's pass to the instrumentalization of memory from above. You know that after 1991, when the Soviet Union didn't exist anymore, all of the countries, but first of all Russia, has undergone a lot of difficult moments, which actually there were a lot of things, a lot of moments which couldn't afford to start the construction of solid collective social memory. And another thing which we didn't have in Russia in those years, in the Yeltsin's era, was the remediation. We didn't have the process of remediation of these difficult histories and difficult memories. The term remediation is elaborated by Astrid L. and Anne Rigney. It's one of the also most important notions in the field of memory studies. So we didn't have this process of remediation related to the Soviet era, which actually brought the contemporary societies of the post-Soviet countries, and particularly Russia, to contradictory worldviews and conflicting ideologies. So that's what was the foundation of this process, let's say the start, the 0 point. Then when we're talking about the early years of Vladimir Putin, so the first years of 2000s, we are talking here about the shift towards a more conservative nationalist political and ideological model. Because what did Putin? He and his team neo-imperial rhetoric, as it was determined by Nikolai Kopasov in his famous book about the neo-imperialism in Russia. So the Putin's administration actually started to intensify the process of nationalization of historical memory, especially in the field of Soviet past. So these histories are not more the property of people, are not more the property which can be used by NGOs, by grassroots activists. No, it's the property of state. And if you are going to work with these memories, if you are going to use them, your activity has to be accepted by the state, or it has to be state itself to participate in this activity. So today's Russian sociocultural realm also features a very, very serious aspects of victimhood. I think that it's also one of the central notions which will be useful to understand what is happening right now with Russia. Why the Russia is invading Ukraine, for example. I think that a lot of people ask themselves about it. Mikaelyan actually tried to answer this question in his 2018 book, talking about the victimhood, where the political regime identifies itself with a victim of alleged enemies, which can be United States of America, Ukrainian nationalists, European Union, name what you want. This is only a projection, a visionary projection created by the victim itself. You know, it's fake. It's a fake reality in which actually the Putin's administration decided, you know, to emerge the whole society. And I found it very, very very hard, you know, to combat, to struggle with this effect of victimhood. So now let's jump to the museums, to the core of this presentation. I will present you my case studies, which are most important also for this political instrumentalization we are talking about. And the first one is the Perm 36 Memorial Museum, which was actually the only Gulag camp preserved after the shutdown and after the early 90s. Here's the image, the draft, how the camp was in the 70s and 80s. The camp existed throughout all the years from the late 40s. So after it was actually opened, you know, after the Second World War. And then it was used not only during the official Gulag years, because, you know, Gulag actually at some point wasn't existing anymore as a system, you know, as a system of labor camps. But the camp Perm 36 itself existed till 1989, when Gorbachev, with his personal edict, closed it, shut it down. So I was already born at that time. So you should understand that Gulag system didn't exist anymore in the late 80s, you know, during the perestroika years. But the camps, the prisoners, they existed, and people continued to die here, like Vasily Stus, like Marchenko. They continued to die into these labor camps. So after the closure in 1989, the deterioration started, because it was, of course, the federal property, the Soviet Union property. They just abandoned it. And in 1994, the volunteers of the Memorial NGO started to launch a project on the preservation and the creation of the museum here. So here I will tell just some things about the Memorial NGO, which is one of the most important NGOs working with the political history, political heritage, and memory in the world today. This organization was established before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So it was the first one to operate on the territory of the Soviet Union, working at that time on the Soviet historical trauma already. And in these recent years, if I'm not mistaken, in the last months of 2021, it was shut down. It was shut down. So officially, legally, it doesn't exist anymore, thanks to the today's Russian regime. So let's return to 1994, when the first memorial volunteers came here and decided to create a museum. Everything you see here, which are the photos actually of 2019 and 18, was made by them, by these volunteers who used grants from America and from the European Union, who were doing fundraising, who were collecting by themselves the collection for the museum. So everything was their private property, actually. It was not a federal property anymore at that time. And then here you see actually the most terrible part of the camp, where people were tortured, where people also died during their permanence in the camp. And so in 2015, the local government came in and told to the team of Viktor Shmirov, who actually created the museum, you have to go out of here. It's not anymore your museum. It's not anymore your collection. It's all ours. So we are talking here about an absolutely illegal, even for Russian standards, an illegal takeover of the private property. And even today, Viktor Shmirov, who collected everything in that museum, cannot take a piece of the collection and take it home, even if it was his private property. The new administration of the museum, placed by the local government, started to, create all these nonsense exhibitions, as the one you can see here, like, with these dim lights and curtains, this fancy Gulag history, as I call it, very glamorous Gulag histories. Then they are creating these nonsense exhibitions. You see here on the left bottom, with actually A4 sheets of paper printed and placed on the floor. This is their genius exhibition design, which actually costs thousands and thousands of rubles of Russian taxpayers, as soon as now it's a state property. So you see, this is the contemporary situation in the only memorial to the Gulag camps in Russian Federation. It was taken over by the state, and it is used by the state to represent the Gulag is something that, yes, it was a bad thing, surely, but it wasn't so bad as people are talking about it. With those curtains, you can survive. You can be accustomed to it in some way. You can do a selfie, and everything will be okay. A very important case study for me, a positive, let's say, case study, is the Sakharov Center in Moscow, the first museum in Moscow related to the Soviet political history. It was created in one of the buildings of the 19th century mansion in Moscow, High Mountains mansion. The building has undergone the process of restoration and rehabilitation and renewal, especially on the first floor, where the new exhibition, this is the annex building when we are doing some temporary exhibitions, where the new exhibition made by Yevgeny As, one of the most famous Russian architects, has been made. This is the exhibition which existed actually from 1996 till today without great changes. It exists today. And from my personal critical point of view, it's the best political history exhibition in today's Russia. Especially why it is the best. It's the best because it's touching, it's emotional, it's very, very accurate, it's very practical. You see the documents, you see the objects, the items of people. It's the best one from my point of view. And it is the creation also of grassroots activists of the Sakharov Foundation, which was an NGO, also is an NGO, and who is actually administrating the museum. So the museum continues to exist like this and continues to be independent. But Sakharov Foundation became a foreign agent some years ago. So this is also a kind of political repression of today's Putin's administration. Because actually in Russia, when a museum or when a socio-cultural foundation becomes a foreign agent, it cannot work anymore. It cannot create cultural events, it cannot invite people, publish something, it just cannot operate in the public space. That's all. So this is also the kind of repression this museum is living right now, but I hope that it will survive in some way, this Putinist regime, Another case study is the GULAG History State Museum, the new building opened in Moscow in 2015. It's a very nice building in the sense that it's a historical building. It was renovated like 100%. Everything inside the building, the inner structure has been actually destroyed and rebuilt anew. It's an interesting project, but it has its critical, very, very critical points. It's a federal museum, so the money and the control here comes from the government. It's 100% state sponsored. And you see that the architects, first of all, decided to use here some kind of stylization. You see these walls, breached walls, you know, like someone has been, you know, killed in front of that wall or something like that, you know, with breaches, you see those lamps, like prison-like lamps. This is the interior of the staircases. I mean, this is what you see when you are just going from one floor to another. Then look at this ridiculous iron cases at the clock room on the left. So, you know, a fancy lady which comes to these museums has to put her Louis Vuitton purse into these prison-like, you know, into this prison-like case. It's a little bit absurd. I don't think that it's ethically accepted in the today's reality. I'm talking about the Western world reality, of course, what we are seeing in the West. I don't think that it's not very, you know, in the line with the international practice, because when we are coming to the museums designed by RRA, by Ralph Applebaum, we are not seeing this kind of stylization like that. So I don't think that this was a good choice for the interior design architecture. This is the exhibition, the interior spaces of the museum. And here is another error made in this museum, a much more serious error. This is the exhibition, the first exhibition, which has been organized for the first year after the museum has been opened. And you can see in the bottom left, they used the contents, the photos, the objects related to the Soviet political repression history to create some ludic activities. You see, this one is a sliding puzzle made actually with the photographs of Gulag prisoners constructing the White Sea-Baltic Canal. So you can see the message here. The message to both kids and adults is, okay, come here, play with it, play with these memories. And as soon as you start to play with these memories, with these difficult and traumatic memories, you start, you know, to take them as something like normal, you know, because when you're playing with it, it's part of your life, and you start to think, oh, you know, it wasn't so hard to construct the White Sea-Baltic Canal at this point. So, or maybe the today's political prisoners of Russia can also do some, you know, forced labor like that. It's not a tragedy anymore for you. So I really find this, and a lot of other critics, as me, find it really horrible as a strategy applied into the museum space, to use such memories as some ludic activities, to use it for stylization, to use it for, you know, for fun. You cannot use these memories for fun of your public, even if you want to insert some, you know, something where actually people can, you know, connect, can participate in some way into some activities inside the museum. This is a new exhibition which has been actually opened after the first one. It's a little bit better. Especially talking about the design, but also talking about the contents. It's better than the first one, but it's still, you know, it's very, very soft version. It's a very soft version of what has happened with that millions of people during the Soviet regime. And now the last but not the least case study is the Boris Yeltsin Museum in Ekaterinburg, also opened in 2015. Here you can see the international stars, Bernasconi Bureau, Ralph Applebaum Associates, in collaboration with the Russian film director Lungin. It's an interesting museum, very fancy, let's say. Actually, it's also a renovation project because at first this has to be a business center, and then it was taken over by local government to construct, and by the foundation, the President's Foundation, to create the Yeltsin Museum. So they have this very interesting media facade. They are very proud of. It's very fancy, very nice at night. You know, young people of Yekaterinburg like to come here in the evening during the summer. They have a very interesting concept when it comes to the use of spaces. For example, Pavel Lungin decided to, you know, make something like a two-level exhibition here. The first one is dedicated to the Soviet history, and the second floor is dedicated to the 7 days that changed Russia. So the years of Yeltsin, how Yeltsin became the president of Russian Federation, and what happened after, until his death. So talking about the exhibition design, this Ralph Applebaum, so it's the maximum standard of today's museum design when it's come to political history. Very interesting, very informative, but there is one fault, one error here, very important. When it comes to the Chechen tragedy, to the first Chechen war, 1995, you see, because when you see, for example, the whole room which is dedicated to the presidential power, when any object which was of the property of Yeltsin, you know, his suit, his coffee cup, everything, you know, is idealized. It's like, you know, something, oh, incredible. And then you see this small room, this photos, 2 photos on the top, with, you know, paper, adhesive paper on the walls, which actually illustrates some events of the Chechen War, very, very, you know, political events, not how people were dying, not how people were suffering, not how were suffering the soldiers during this war, not how the local population of Chechnya, of Grozny, were suffering during the bombs falling on Grozny. You see, you know, this small wall, which tells you nothing. Even Wikipedia can tell you more. And then you also see here some kind of stylization, you know, this holes from the bullets, you know, or some objects inside the glass cases, but they actually don't tell you, they tell you nothing about the Chechen War. And I should say that the administration of the museum understands that this was not a very strong representation of one of the greatest tragedies of the modern and contemporary Russia. So I'm concluding everything, and to wrap up, I will just say some words. So first of all, I want to say that the critical analysis of these above-mentioned case studies leads us to the following conclusion, that the quality of a formal and conceptual museum project directly depends on a current top-down policy of dissonant memories, past presencing, to use also the term of Sharon MacDonald. You know, how you put the past into the present. Suffering from the effects of victimhood, of nationalization of history and memory discourse, traumatic histories become an instrument of propaganda, and the Russian political class starts to see itself as a predominant transmitter of cultural values. So, you know, the government says, the state said, I'm the only transmitter of these values related to the trauma, historical trauma, and difficult heritage. You people, the activists, grassroots activists, cannot control these narratives, cannot control these cultural values anymore. I'm the only who controls the situation here. And I have to say that this instrumentalization becomes a very useful tool when it comes to all you know, areas of politics, at least in Russia. You can use it as you want. You can use it as brainwashing. You can use it for the war propaganda. You can use it to explain to Russian people what's happening in Ukraine, on your terms, of course, in your way. You can use it for education, for socio-cultural realms, even for economy. In any realm of everyday life of the country, you can find a way to use this instrumentalization of historical and memory discourse. What Putin actually is doing since 2012 very, very actively. He was doing, his team was doing it till the first years of his presidency, but it wasn't so evident. But since 2012, since his second mandate as a president, he began to do it in a very aggressive way, in a way in which you can see it everywhere. You can see these things as the takeover of the museums, as the controlling of narratives, as the museums becoming foreign agencies, foreign agents, and they cannot continue their activity anymore. So we see it in a very, very intensive way, this instrumentalization after 2012. And the last question I want to raise is how today's events, to the war, for example, could be represented in museums, Russian museums in future, or maybe also in international museums, not only in museums in Russian Federation. How the political repression of today's regime can be represented. And you see here the photo of Alexei Navalny in prison behind the bars. How the war can be represented. Because we have here a list of dilemmas. And the dilemmas, as I see it, are the following. How are we going to challenge the conventional boundaries of such kind of museum exhibition and museum contact? How are we going to work with them? How are we going to represent them, both from the architectural point of view and from the point of view of the exhibition design, and from the point of view of information, of media, of contents? How are we going to work with the conventional boundaries which exist today? The second dilemma, the prioritization of memories and narratives, because you cannot speak about everything, about any family, about any event. You have to pick up something which is most important. So how are we going, what events of the Ukrainian war will be able to pick up in future to construct this narrative, and to what episodes and memories we have give some priority here. Then the incorporation of these unsettling memories within the museums which already exist. This is also a problem that will rise 100% in future, maybe when the Russia will be different or the war will be over. And the last but not least, the effect of these new unsettling memories, the memories of today, I mean, on heritage providers and on the public, on the heritage, let's say, receivers in some way. Because here is also a complex situation. They are the providers, because people are the providers and the receivers of memory at the same time. You know, it's like a very double situation. So you have to think about it as from the point of view of providers of heritage, as from the point of view of receivers of heritage. And there are a lot of issues there. We have to think about it together. We have all specialists related to museums, architecture, interior design, collection, preservation, history, even art. I mean, even artists. We should all think about it today, because tomorrow, when the war is over, or when the Putin's regime is over, it will be already late to think about it. We have to understand our strategies of working with this reality and with this future memories, future heritage, just already today. Thank you for your attention, and I hope it was interesting and useful for you.